What if I told you that in 1947, a town of 3,200 people simply vanished? Not destroyed by war, not abandoned due to economic collapse, but literally erased from existence overnight. The buildings, the streets, the cemetery with its 200-year-old graves, the railway station that had served passengers for 70 years, all gone, as if they had never existed at all. This is the story of Millbrook Falls, a town that cartographers refuse to acknowledge ever existed, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. A place where reality itself seemed to fold in on itself, leaving behind only whispered testimonies and a conspiracy of silence that reaches the highest levels of government. On the morning of October 13, 1947, conductor William Hayes was running the 7:15 train from Albany to Buffalo, when he noticed something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. As the locomotive approached what should have been Millbrook Falls Station, Hayes saw nothing but an empty field stretching toward the horizon. Not ruins, not debris, not even the foundation stones where buildings had stood the day before. Just pristine grassland swaying in the autumn wind. Hayes pulled the emergency brake, convinced he had somehow taken a wrong turn on tracks he had traveled for 15 years. But the mile markers were correct. The bend in the river was exactly where it should be. Even the distinctive rock formation, known locally as Devil's Thumbs, stood in its proper place. Everything was as it should be, except for the complete absence of a town that had existed for over 2 centuries. Millbrook Falls had been established in 1792 by Dutch settlers who were drawn to the area by the powerful waterfall that provided energy for mills and factories. By the early 20th century, it had grown into a prosperous community built around textile manufacturing and lumber processing. The town boasted 3 churches, 2 schools, a hospital, a movie theater, and over 600 homes. What made Millbrook Falls particularly notable was its isolation. Nestled in a valley surrounded by dense forest, it was accessible only by a single railroad line and one winding mountain road. This isolation, which had once protected the town from outside troubles, would later make its disappearance all the more mysterious. According to testimony gathered from neighboring communities, the last confirmed sighting of Millbrook Falls was on October 10, 1947. A traveling salesman named Robert Chen had visited the town that day, selling household goods door to door. In his written statement to investigators, Chen described the town as completely normal. Children playing in the streets, smoke rising from chimneys, the usual bustle of small-town life. But Chen also mentioned something odd. He noted that many of the townspeople seemed unusually pale and drawn, as if they hadn't slept in days. Several residents asked him strange questions about the outside world, as though they hadn't received news or visitors in weeks. Most disturbing of all, Chen reported that the children he encountered seemed to age before his eyes. A little girl, who had appeared to be 7 or 8 years old when he first saw her playing hopscotch, looked distinctly older by the time he left town that evening. Her face had become gaunt, her movements slower, as if decades had passed in the span of a few hours. When Hayes' report reached railroad headquarters, officials initially assumed there had been a scheduling error or track confusion. But when 3 separate search parties were dispatched to the coordinates of Millbrook Falls, each returned with the same impossible report: there was nothing there. Government investigators arrived within 48 hours. What they found defied all logical explanation. Geological surveys confirmed that the terrain showed no signs of recent disturbance. The soil samples revealed no trace of concrete foundations, no fragments of building materials, no evidence that humans had ever settled in the area. Yet archives in the state capitol contained detailed records of Millbrook Falls dating back over 150 years. Birth certificates, death records, tax assessments, census data, all documenting the lives of thousands of people in a town that, according to physical evidence, had never existed. As word of the investigation spread, dozens of people came forward with stories about Millbrook Falls. Former residents who claimed to have moved away years earlier brought photographs, letters, and personal belongings from their time in the town. These items were subjected to forensic analysis. and experts confirmed their authenticity. Despite the fact that they supposedly came from a place that had never been built, Sarah Morrison, who claimed to have been born in Millbrook Falls in 1923, provided the most chilling testimony. She described growing up in a town where time moved differently, where seasons lasted longer than they should, where people aged at inconsistent rates. Morrison spoke of families who would age rapidly over the course of a single winter, grandparents and grandchildren reaching the same apparent age within months. She described children who grew old while their parents remained young, and elderly residents who would suddenly appear as teenagers again. Most terrifying of all, Morrison claimed that the townspeople were aware of their condition, but powerless to stop it. They knew that their existence was unstable, that reality was slowly unraveling around them, but they could not leave. Every attempt to travel beyond the town limits resulted in the person finding themselves back in the town square, with no memory of how they had returned. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that powerful forces were working to suppress information about Millbrook Falls. Files began disappearing from government archives. Witnesses were visited by unmarked government agents and warned against speaking publicly about their experiences. Newspaper editors were pressured to kill stories about the vanished town. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a physicist who had been studying temporal anomalies, was brought in to examine the site where Millbrook Falls had supposedly stood. Her preliminary findings suggested that the area exhibited properties consistent with what she termed a reality fracture, a location where the normal laws of physics had somehow been suspended. Warren's research was abruptly terminated after only 3 days, and she was transferred to a classified project in Nevada. Before her departure, she managed to smuggle out a single photograph that would become the only physical evidence of her findings. The image showed what appeared to be empty grassland, but when subjected to certain types of analysis, faint outlines of buildings and streets became visible, as if they existed in a different dimensional plane. The truth about Millbrook Falls would remain hidden for decades, until a deathbed confession in 1998 finally revealed the horrifying reality. Thomas Blackwood, a former government scientist who had worked on classified projects during World War II, admitted that Millbrook Falls had been the site of experimental research into temporal manipulation. According to Blackwood, the town had been selected as a test site for a secret military program designed to accelerate or slow the passage of time within a designated area. The goal was to create tactical advantages on future battlefields by trapping enemy forces in temporal bubbles or rapidly aging their equipment. The experiments had initially shown promise. Researchers were able to create small pockets where time moved at different rates, but something had gone catastrophically wrong during the final test on October 11, 1946. Instead of creating a controlled temporal field, the experiment had torn a hole in reality itself. The 3,200 residents of Millbrook Falls had been caught in a temporal collapse, their existence folding back on itself until they had never been born. The town, its buildings, and even the physical evidence of its existence had been erased from the timeline, leaving behind only the memories of those who had encountered the community before the experiment. The empty field where Millbrook Falls once stood remains unchanged to this day. Visitors report an overwhelming sense of loss when standing in the location, as if the very air remembers what was taken from it. Local wildlife avoids the area, and compasses spin wildly when brought near the coordinates. Official government records still deny that Millbrook Falls ever existed. The families who lost their homes, their histories, and their very identities in the temporal collapse have never received acknowledgement or compensation. They exist in a bureaucratic limbo, citizens of a country that refuses to admit they were ever born. Perhaps most chilling of all, some researchers believe that the experiment that destroyed Millbrook Falls was not unique. They point to other unexplained disappearances throughout history, other places that exist only in memory and faded documents. How many communities have been erased from existence by scientific hubris? How many lives have been unraveled by experiments? We will never be allowed to know about the next time you drive through an empty field and feel an inexplicable sadness. Ask yourself, what might have stood here once? What voices were silenced? What stories were untold? What entire worlds were deleted from reality by those who thought they could master time itself? Some places are forgotten by accident. Others are erased by design. And in the empty spaces between what was and what is, the ghosts of Millbrook Falls continue to cry out for someone, anyone, to remember that they once existed. The truth is out there, buried in classified files and sealed in the memories of the few who dare to speak. But be careful how deep you dig. Some secrets are buried for good reason, and some towns disappear, not because they were destroyed, but because they were never meant to exist in the first place.